circle, ... you just got the cootie shot. That was the day my friend Amanda saved me in the first grade. Because by giving me this cootie shot, which is just like a simple vaccination, she effectively made me immune to a crazy disease called the cooties, which, for those of you who don't know, is this highly contagious and infectious disease that's transmitted by little boys and girls when they talk to each other in elementary school. So for a 7-year-old Mexican girl who had just arrived to the US, it kind of took me some time to understand why the girls in my class said I had gotten the cooties to begin with. See, every day during lunch, I did something outrageous, because I would go out into the playground with my lunchbox, and I would just talk to my best friend, Alonzo. Ew, Alonzo. Sorry, Zeke. And that somehow required this vaccination. That cootie shot stuck with me, literally, until today. Fast forward a couple of decades, and here I am at Stanford, excited to talk about gender equality issues, a subject I care deeply about since that pretty traumatizing day at the playground. Except every time we talk about gender equality issues, everything from gender biases, equal pay, gender role expectations, women in the workplace, all I see around me is, for the most part, women. Women participants and women panelists discussing what it means to be a woman. And when we do engage with men in these conversations, perhaps in classrooms like this one, or forums, or dinners, I kind of get a sense that the air starts to become a little bit thicker, that the tension rises, and that the conversations don't seem to move forward. And that brings me to the subject of today's low keynote. Small conversations can create big changes. I'll walk you through 3 things today. First, so what goes on when we have these conversations between men and women that makes things so difficult? Second, why does it matter to have these conversations anyways? And third, what can we do to make things better? So on the first point, what goes on when we engage in these conversations that makes things so difficult? To explore that, I surveyed 135 men and 131 women at the GSB, that's more than 1 out of every 4 of you, anonymously, and had coffee chats with over 30 men over the past month, where I simply asked you, what do you think and how do you feel when we engage in these conversations at the GSB? And what I found was quite unsettling. I'll start first with what I found out about the men. See, the men, they're not feeling great in these conversations. More than 70% of men describe their feelings as frustrated and not excited. More than a third said their first reaction when they found themselves in these conversations was, oh no. One of them changed the multiple choice option and said, my first reaction is to find the nearest exit. And see, that might be because men are feeling judged. Men said things like, I'm feeling guilty for just showing up as a man in these conversations. It's a lose-lose for me. It's so easy to mess it up, I'd just rather not say anything. If I make the slightest mistake, I'll be vilified. Regardless of what I say, women still get offended. The downside is pretty high, the upside, not clear. So not surprisingly, 81% of men said they tend to participate less when talking about gender equality than any other issue at the GSB. But see, despite not feeling great and feeling judged, men are supportive. 96% of men said that gender equality issues are important to them and that they should be discussed. Many of them quoted their wives, their sisters, their daughters, their partners saying things like, I love my wife, but that doesn't give me a say in these conversations. While I'm wildly supportive, there's something insincere about my opinion. I'm a strong supporter of gender equality, but I find myself in the way of gender equality. So the frustration comes, it seems, from a place of being easily misunderstood, not from a place of not caring. So what did I find out about the women? See, the women are also not feeling great in these conversations. More than 75% of women describe their feelings as frustrated too, and defensive. And their frustration comes from different reasons than the men. It's because these conversations don't move quickly. We stay on the same safe and superficial topics. It's hard to get my point across. The men don't get it. And women make it very personal. The majority of women described a big incentive to participate, saying things like, The majority of women described a big incentive to participate, saying things like, I have to go out there and defend my gender, I'm carrying the torch, I'm paving the road. And see, I can speak for myself in saying that there's so much in my mind about these topics that it is very easy to get very emotional and charged up about it, as I just did now. So zooming out from what I found out about the survey, about the men and the women, this kind of reminded me of a game of hide and seek. See, to me, the women are playing seekers. It's our territory. We're on the lookout looking for any small mistake. And the men are kind of playing hiding. They feel little incentive to participate. They're kind of waiting for the game to be over, and they can find the nearest exit. But the problem with this dynamic is that we've missed each other in these conversations. We've missed the opportunity to build something of value, to innovate, to share personal stories, to actually hear what the other person has to say. Small conversations can create big changes. So now to my second point, why does it matter that we can have good conversations anyways? For inspiration for that, I went to a place very far removed from the GSP. Growing up, I visited an indigenous community in the northern mountains of Mexico where gender equality issues are pretty real. And for years in this community, the little girls didn't have access to schools because there were only enough teachers to educate the little boys. But you see, all of the teachers were women. So these women teachers gathered together, and door by door, and family by family, had the smallest of conversations with these families to explain that if they didn't educate the little girls, there wouldn't be any teachers for the little boys or girls of generations to come. And the point of this story is that it was because of having these small conversations and stepping into the homes of these families that they were able to create bigger changes. That reminds me of a story of one of the men I surveyed at the GSP who talked to me about his mom, who had been abandoned by her husband and had to quit school at a very young age and worked tirelessly her entire life to get her son to Stanford. And he said, "The most productive conversations I have about gender equality issues at the GSP are when I Skype with my mom on the weekends. So not in these classrooms." And that really got to me, see, because the point about being good at these conversations isn't to talk about me and my extremely privileged position as a woman at the GSP, but rather to give a space and voice to talk about the millions of women who can't even dream of the possibility of being at the GSP, let alone have 9 minutes to talk to you about talking about it. So now to my third point, what can we do to make things better? My gift to you today is the following. Circle, circle, dot, dot, you just got a cootie shot. You see, Amanda never told me that the cooties requires a revaccination in grad school. And the point of that is that we should feel free to go out there and have conversations that make us feel excited, engaged, and not frustrated. And that requires a lot of intentionality on both the men and the women. It requires suspending judgment, making mistakes, allowing the other to make mistakes. See, over the past month, I've learned more about gender equality by talking to men and asking men than I ever learned in any woman-only event. And I realized that as a person that gets very emotional and takes this topic very personally, I have an important choice to make about how I approach men in these conversations. I can choose to get easily offended, or I can choose to get easily curious. I choose to get easily curious. So I want you to pick a person from the opposite gender in this room. I pick Alonso. And invite that person for a 15-minute coffee chat about gender equality. And if you don't have a specific topic in mind, you can talk about your reactions to this little keynote. And the challenge here is for the men, ask that uncomfortable question and feel free to say what you actually think. And to the women, ask them what they think and how they feel, and be prepared to get curious. And maybe instead of playing a game of hide and seek, we can play a game of puzzles where we put the pieces together, bit by bit. Because I do think that it's in these small conversations between the little boys and girls in that playground in elementary school and between the young men and women here now at the GSP where we'll find the answers to those bigger questions. Thank you.